I spent an entire year studying for the LSAT, and at least half of it was a complete waste of time. I ended up improving my score from a 152 to a 175, so I ultimately did come to learn from my mistakes. Since then, I've helped thousands of other students avoid making the same mistakes I did. Today, I'm going to walk you through what not to do when studying for the LSAT, learning from my experience and the experience of my students. Back when I was studying for the LSAT, there were roughly 45 numbered LSAT prep tests. Until recently, there were nearly 100 LSAT prep tests, and going forward, without logic games, there are going to be about 60 released LSAT prep tests. When you have all these numbered prep tests, there's this temptation to take test after test just to measure yourself, but the risk is that you end up burning through valuable practice material. I call this the obsessive practice exam narrative. The idea that taking test after test will magically unlock some secret of the LSAT, when in reality, all it does is waste valuable practice material. So instead, I want you to avoid looking for those dopamine hits, getting your results, being happy or sad about them, and moving on. And instead, I want you to take the time to slow down and learn from your mistakes. And learning from your mistakes is not about looking at explanations on some random forum or website, not just Googling them. Explanations can too often serve as a crutch, preventing you from developing your own understanding of the question and the tricks and traps that you personally are uniquely prone to falling for. A lot of explanations out there end up being some expert's perfect way of solving a question that wouldn't actually work in realistic timed test day conditions. So rather than going straight to the explanations, I would invite you to instead think through the reasoning of the question for yourself, and in particular, what led you to get the question wrong? What could you do differently going forward? I've developed a framework for this called the Socratic review method, where we guide you through getting a more correct understanding of the question, looking at specifically what led you astray during your initial attempt, and upon reflection, what could you do differently going forward? Of course, before taking practice tests and before reviewing practice tests, you want to build that foundation first, not just jump straight into the timed practice tests. To help you build a foundation, I've created a framework underlying all of my LSAT study plans called the LASER approach to LSAT prep. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. Notice that exams comes towards the end of LASER, the E for exams, and review, R for review, is at the very end of that process. But first, you are learning. You are reviewing foundational materials. This could involve reading those 500-page LSAT phone books to build the foundation, or it could involve watching short, bite-sized lesson videos like what we have in our courses to give you a quick overview of each section and each question type. The A in LASER is for accuracy, drilling questions by type to help you better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. S is for sections, doing individual timed sections to work on your pacing. E is for exams and endurance, and this is what everyone wants to jump to, getting those full-length time practice tests under your belt, getting your results, getting a sense of where you stand. And then, of course, R for review, included throughout the process to help you determine what mistakes you're making and why, so that you can extract those key insights to improve for the next time. Now, of course, I always want you using real, actual, official LSAT questions, like what LSAT releases in their Law Hub Advantage system. You don't want to do fake LSAT questions like what they have in LSAT for Dummies. Those are full of mistakes because, surprise, surprise, it is really hard to write accurate, realistic LSAT questions. I know personally because back when logic games were on the test, I wrote roughly 10 of my own unofficial logic games from scratch, and it took me a good 5-6 hours to write each of them, including all the questions associated and making sure they were realistic and did not contain any mistakes at all. The companies that include fake LSAT questions in their books are usually doing so because they want to avoid paying licensing fees to LSAT, but of course they're not doing their due diligence to make sure the questions are solid. So instead, avoid LSAT for Dummies, use the real deal directly from LSAT. Don't waste your time on the fake stuff. It's going to waste your time and frustrate you. Now, just as I don't want you to jump into the practice tests, I also don't want you to avoid doing practice tests for too long. There are some students out there who, when I speak with them, they've been studying for months, and when I ask them, where are you scoring? they reveal to me that they are too nervous to even take a practice test. Big problem, because you've got to work on endurance. You want test day itself to feel like just another run through, and that requires having gone through the motions several times before. And you want to build up your endurance, you want to build up your LSAT stamina so that your accuracy is not dropping on section 4 just because it is section 4. So you can drill questions, you can build the foundation first, but don't delay before moving on to individual timed sections to work on your pacing, or before doing full-length timed practice tests to work on your endurance. And of course, you've got to get a sense of where you stand. You got to get a sense of how you would do if it were test day itself, because that can give you some motivation to study that much harder, to reach your goal score. And it can be a rude wake-up call sometimes to how much work you have to put in. And that certainly has its value as well. If you have not done any LSAT studying yet, I would not recommend taking too much stock in your first practice test, because it'll simply be an indication of what you already know, which is that you have not yet done the work. But of course, you can do the work and you can get that increase. So whether your cold diagnostic is a 150, a 140, or even a 120, you can prove a ton from where you're starting. It just requires putting in the work, because the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. And the difference between me and you is that I've been doing this a lot longer. I've had a lot more opportunity to learn the patterns of the test and to become better at spotting the tricks and traps LSAT throws at you, but you can learn them too. There are dozens of released exams. They're available to you. Just put in the work, analyze them, review them, and you can understand those patterns as well. Now, there are roughly 60 numbered exams in the new LSAT format, LSATs 101 to 158 at the time of recording, and you will get through them faster than you think, especially if you are taking a practice test every day or every other day. By the way, don't take a practice test every single day. It is a recipe for burnout. Even every other day might be too much. It might be too fast a pace of burning through that material, because you want to make sure that you are taking the time to properly review your mistakes, to analyze what you're getting wrong and why. I've developed a framework for this called the Socratic review method that we use in our courses and in our one-on-one coaching at LSAT Unplugged. And the idea here is that we guide you through the process of analyzing in logical reasoning, the argument, the question stem, or the answer choices. If it was a tempting wrong answer that threw you off, what made it tempting and what ultimately makes it wrong? If it was an unappealing right answer choice, what made it unappealing and what ultimately makes it correct? Because you have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer. And until you know which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, you are likely to end up making the same mistakes again. And so that's why you want to review every single question that you get wrong and every question that you have difficulty with. You can try to do this on your own, but if you'd like our help, you can check out the links below the video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out, especially if you are having trouble getting through those 500-page LSAT textbooks, because they can be really, really boring. Back when I was studying for the LSAT, I found them so boring that I had to reward myself after finishing a single chapter by watching an episode of my favorite TV show. It was Chappelle's Show at the time. It gave me some comedic light relief from the dry, boring LSAT material. Find your own reward, or even better yet, avoid the textbooks entirely and find a resource that is more engaging, or even better yet, get some accountability and motivation through some one-on-one coaching with an expert who's been through the process. Again, if you'd like more information, links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. Students often underestimate just how much of a factor motivation and accountability play in LSAT prep, because it can be difficult to motivate yourself to put in the work, especially when so much LSAT material out there is dry and boring and technical. And so it is really important to have a consistent schedule laying out exactly what to do, so that you're not studying just when you feel like it, but you actually have time blocked off in your calendar to make it happen, and you have a list of assignments regarding what you've got to work on. That's why I recommend using that laser approach I mentioned earlier: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review, to help you craft a personalized day-by-day study plan, so that you're not leaving it to guesswork, you're not leaving it to chance. And you know, I want to work through exams 101 through 158 in that new LSAT format by my LSAT test date, whether it's 3 months away, 4 months away, or 5 months away. Whenever it is, if you want a top LSAT score, you're going to want to put in the work. And so I strongly recommend laying out that plan for yourself up front, so that you don't leave it to chance. You'll put in the work to make it happen. And for this very reason, At LSAT Unplugged, we create personalized day-by-day study plans for all of our students using my laser approach to LSAT prep to orient you from now until LSAT test day, laying out exactly what to do. Now, if you are worried about burning through all the released material, you don't need to worry about that, because even though there are only 60 exams or so now versus the nearly 100 exams in the old format, you can still get tons of value through redoing LSAT practice tests. Unless you were going to get a perfect 180 by doing that same exam again, if you were going to get the same question wrong again, there is definitely something to be derived, some value to be gained from redoing that practice test. You want to make sure that you are fully extracting the lessons learned, or that you could learn from having done that material, so that you will avoid making the same mistake when you encounter a question involving that same method of reasoning or that same trick on LSAT test day. Don't underestimate how much work it's going to take to get that top LSAT score. There are tons of practice questions out there, but it will take time to see the patterns, which is why it is so important that you get through as many questions as possible, that you expose yourself to as many questions as possible, because that way you'll see the same method of reasoning, whether in one context on climate change, in one context dinosaur extinction, in one context car speed limits, whatever it's going to be. You're going to see the LSAT beyond a surface level understanding, so that you can see the code underlying the exam, like Neo sees through the matrix, to see what's really there, and then you'll be better positioned to spot the patterns. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.